So yeah, I'm from Butterfly Conservation. I'm representing Team Moth, who are obviously going to win. And we're a British charity, and we're devoted to saving butterflies, moths, and their habitats as well, so throughout the UK. And our vision is a world where butterflies and moths thrive and can be enjoyed by everyone forever. And we do lots of different things, like BCT, we deliver lots of different projects and monitoring and things like that. But one of the projects that I'm involved in, or Butterfly Conservation is involved in, is Big City Butterflies. So I'm the engagement officer for Big City Butterflies. And another project is Kent's Magnificent Moths, which Emma, one of our guest speakers, is involved in as well. So we do lots of different things like that. And just to introduce Big City Butterflies, it's a 4-year project which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So we're really thankful for that funding to allow us to do this work in London. And it's really all about inspiring people in London to get involved in butterflies and moths, and discover their green spaces as well. So London is a really great place for moths and butterflies already, but we want to make it even better. So in answer to your question, yes, Scotland's great for moths, and so are other places, including urban habitats as well. So that's the focus on our project. So yeah, that's that in a nutshell. And I think it's already time for the first fact off. So throughout the night, we'll be competing with different facts. And the first one is diversity. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. And Naomi's going to talk about something.
Well, I think diversity, you know, bats, quarter of all mammals. I think we're in with quite a good chance here, really. So there are, I checked on the ASM mammal diversity database to get the exact figure. I believe at the moment there are 1,447 species of bats all around the world. Now I opted to put in a photo of the smallest bat here. So on the right there, that is a bumblebee bat, also known as Kitty's hognose bat. It weighs less than 2 grams. The body is only about 3 centimeters long. And obviously there are much bigger bats as well. You know, the golden crowned fruit bat, I believe, has a wingspan of about 5'6", 1.7 meters. So that's pretty big. But I think my little bat might be smaller than your big moth from the look of it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I might win for the amount of species. So Lepidoptera are the group that butterflies and moths belong to. So Lepidoptera means scaly wings, and butterflies and moths all belong to that group. So throughout the world, there's 150,000 species of Lepidoptera, and actually the majority of those are moths, and they comprise 15% of all insect species. So there's a huge amount of them. And I've opted for the biggest moth, and that's the Atlas moth. And you can see there it's absolutely huge, and it can get up to 27 centimeters. So, you know, wider than a human handspan there. So yeah, my moth's definitely bigger than your your bat. Yeah.
Oh, fab. So I feel at this point, having talked about Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths, what is the difference between a butterfly and a moth, Ellie?
So we get asked this quite a lot, and there are some differences, but they do overlap quite a bit as well. So there's not really a specific answer that everyone's happy with, if that makes sense. But the main differences we say are that butterflies have antennae that have clubs on the end, so like little balls on the end of them. And moths will have tapered antennae, so they go in at the ends, or they have feathered or combed antennae. So they've got those big kind of like fluffy combed looking antennae that you sometimes see. So it's the males that have those. So that's one main difference. And another one we say is how they hold their wings at rest. So butterflies, hard to show on camera, but butterflies hold them back and vertically across their backs. And moths often hold them horizontally at rest. So it's how they hold them when they're at rest. So those are sort of 2 main differences, but they can overlap. And lots of people think that moths are characterized by being brown and boring, and butterflies are colorful, but that's not true. Moths are incredible, and they've got such an amazing diversity. And yeah, that's part of what we want to show you tonight as well. So yeah, those are some differences there, but they do overlap.
Yeah. So if there's all these moths out there and they're not all just brown and boring, how do we tell the difference between some of these different moths?
Well, so there's lots of different ways you can tell the difference, and obviously things like reference books are great. But where this actually brings us on to Emma now, who's going to talk to us about how you can tell the difference between some common ones, and also introduce us to the world of moth trapping. So it's a really good way to build up your identification skills and learn more about moths as well. So Emma Pestridge is Kent Magnuson Moths Engagement Officer, which is a bit of a mouthful, and I'll pass you over to her now.
Yeah, it is definitely a mouthful. I still haven't got used to it. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, from the beginning. Perfect. I think that is all sharing. Okay, so yeah, as Ellie was saying, so I work for BC on moth specific project, unlike Big City Butterflies that is doing butterflies and moths. We're just kind of really focusing on the moths, and just in the county of Kent. So the reason it was chosen in Kent was that Kent has the most rare species of moth that are found in the UK that aren't found anywhere else in the UK. So just to home in on what Elle said about how many different types of moths there are in, well, Lepidoptera in the world, just in the UK, there is 2,500 different species of moth. These range from the big moths to kind of the really micro moths that you need to get your microscope out to have a little look at. So we're definitely not going to cover that many this evening. I'm just going to cover like the top hits that you might see during the day, because they're not all night flying. There's actually a lot that do fly in the day. But to start with the night flying species, so you can see here, we've just got a light trap. It doesn't harm them at all. The light just attracts them, and then you'll see that it's got a cone and it can go down into these egg boxes, and they'll be quite happy. They'll sit on these egg boxes until the morning, till first light really, and we can go and survey them and just see what we've got in the area. If you go at different months, we'll get completely different species. So you can see this is just a different one. This is just using a UV bulb rather than an MV one, which is what the first picture was. So you can just see that they're all quite similar, and we just put a white sheet around them, so if any land next to the trap, not in the trap, we can see them and not tread on them if they're on the grass and hiding. So yeah, so none of them are really harmed at all. The lights run quite cold, so it's not going to be that kind of when a light in cartoons, when a moth flies to a light and it gets zapped. These are absolutely fine, and we can just release them in the morning. So here we go. So we've been running some moth events, so we can have a little look. So people just come when it first starts getting dark, and yeah, and they stay till around midnight, and it's really fun actually, just using torchlight. Kind of makes you feel like a massive kid again, which is always really fun in my eyes. So yeah, so we're just going to have a little look at probably just about 8 species of really common moth that during the summer kind of months you'll get in your garden, or around and about if you're going for walks and things like that. And just to really help emphasize Elle's point as to why I think moths are going to win this evening, none of them even look remotely the same. So you'll see how diverse they actually are. So the first one here, we've got the buff tip. It's widespread, it kind of lives on deciduous trees, just resting, and it'll rest during the day, and you can see that it looks really like a kind of broken birch tree. So yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So you can see what I was illustrating, when they're at rest, they rest their wings like just kind of down by the side of them. So this one's, it's probably is about as big. It's about 5 centimeters, the wingspan. So you can see, compared to my finger, how different it looks when it's flying. And then they've used, you know, their forewings to camouflage themselves really good against the twigs, so that predators can't find them. So the next one we've got here, so we've got the elephant hawk moth and the small elephant hawk moth being the slightly smaller one on the right. These are beautiful, and they're really eye-catching. Kind of anyone that sees one, you know, it absolutely distills all moth myths that people think. They're not boring, they're not dull. You know, we've got these bright pink almost moths, which are almost kind of magical really, but they're best known really, and they get their name from their caterpillar. A caterpillar is massive, you know, it's really like the size of your finger kind of size, and it kind of looks like an elephant's trunk, and it's got these false eyes on the side, which makes them look a lot larger than they actually are, to scare away things. But these guys are amazing, and they're even in flying, so they love things that are in quite a lot of people's gardens, such as buddleia and honeysuckle and those kind of things. Now on the next slide, we've got a little video of the elephant hawk moth just vibrating its wings, warming up. Here we go. So they're quite big, so they can't just fly away straight away. They have to kind of vibrate their wings a little bit first to kind of get the heat up so that they can fly away. Now this moth at the front that you can see is one of my favorite moths. Starting this job, I didn't think I'd have a favorite moth, but here I do a few months later. This is called the rosy footman, and it just looks so beautiful. It looks like someone scribbled with biro on its back, and it's named a footman moth after, so a group of moths are called the footman moths because of their narrow wings that are held stiffly down the side of their bodies. So this is from Georgian England, which is when they got their name, when footmen were quite common, so they get their name from footmen from hundreds of years ago. And then this one at the back, see, this was filmed in some marshes down in Kent. So this double-lobed moth is quite common in kind of marsh lands, but not as common as the rest in urban environments. So that's why we're not going to focus on that one. The next one, here we go. So we've got the peppered moth. So you can see that they're completely different, although they are the same species. They're just different forms. If we go on to the next slide, you can see how different they actually are. So this moth is also dubbed Darwin's moth. It perfectly illustrates evolution. And that's because, so this top form, the white with the kind of black peppered splodges over it, was the original form, and it was used to look like lichen on trees. And then during the Industrial Revolution, when soot and smoke and pollution covered a lot of kind of these urban areas, this black, darker form started to form and became a lot more common. So that they were also camouflaged and hidden against any predators that may eat them. Now, nowadays you get both forms, and you can see how different they actually are. And it is a perfect example of how these moths have adapted to live in urban environments, you know, dirty environments, and have still maintained their perfect camouflage, which is amazing. So the next one, here we go. So we've got the silver Y, which is a perfect example of moths that are just named after what they look like. So the Latin name for this part of it is autographa, which means written in one's own hand, which you can see it's got that Y. It's a bit upside down. You might have to tilt your head. I didn't rotate the video. So you can see it's a Y, and it's like a silver metallic colour. So these are really easy to see if you're out and about. They fly in the day. They've got a nice kind of whirly action, and yeah, these are pretty good, pretty easy to distinguish between the rest. So these are a good one to see. And then the next one also will fly and rest during the day. So we've got the cinnabar moth. So he's got bright red hind wings as well, and it's named after, obviously, cinnabar, the red mineral. And these caterpillars, you might have seen these caterpillars if you have any ragwort, or you've seen any ragwort around. They're quite bright striped, but yeah, these guys are really good. You know, they've got their bright colours to kind of tell birds and different things like that, that they're kind of, you know, not very tasty, and they, you know, have a lot of toxins in. So these guys are really good, and you'll see them flapping around and resting during the day. And the last one, which is only recently in the past few years, I think this is a video, perfect. You know, in the past 10 years, really, not really few, have been so common. So here we go. There we go. There we go. It's so common. So this is the Jersey tiger moth. So as the name suggests, it started to colonise in Jersey first, and it's moved up, and it's quite prevalent now in the south of England and in London as well. So yeah, so it's warm day flying, similar to the elephant hawk moth, that they like buddleia, things like that, nettle, bramble, anything like that. And I think you can, this is a really good slide to end on. As you can see, that this could easily be confused with a butterfly. You know, moths are boring, they're not all night flying, and yeah, I think this is a beautiful moth. So there you go. I will just stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Emma. I have to admit, they are quite pretty, and they're definitely not all dull and boring. So I do stand corrected there.
Making a note of that, Naomi. I do want to know, Naomi, how you got into bats, just quickly before we go on to our next fact.
Well, I actually started first getting into bats because I worked in a zoo for 10 years, and we had fruit bats that I would talk about a lot. And then while I was ironically, I was in Jersey while I was doing this, so following on from the Jersey tiger moth. And then I joined the Jersey bat group and started learning a bit more about our little native moths as well. And then eventually got the chance to come and work for BCT. So yeah, I did have to admit in my interview for BCT that I knew more about fruit bats at that point than I did about microbats, but my knowledge has grown because there is so much brilliant, fascinating stuff to learn about them. But Ellie, how about you? Moths, butterflies, how did you get into that?
So I actually got into butterflies first, sorry, moths, through the local butterfly branch in Dorset, where I'm from, and it's very similar for bats. Actually, there's all these local groups that you can join, and I went on one walk and I was just hooked because I'd never seen so many different species of butterfly. It's just that, you know, when you don't know about them, the first time you start seeing different ones, it's just amazing. And then actually moth was more in lockdown, so there's been they think there's been a rise in moth trapping during lockdown because obviously people are spending more time in their back gardens. So I just started that in lockdown. I was absolutely hooked and managed to get my mum hooked as well. So getting her to get up and look at the moths for me, just amazing. Yeah. So that's where I started. And that was when I was quite young with the butterfly group. So it's grown from there. Nice.
Well, I guess one of the things these groups of animals have in common is the fact that they fly. So I think round 2 we thought should be on flight for our fact off, and I'm fairly confident about this because I picked a Nethusius pipistrelle as my bat. Now this is, I don't know, there was an article earlier in the year about the Olympian bats. This was a Nethusius bat that has definitely, it was ringed in the UK and it was then caught in Russia. So this individual bat, tiny little bat, has flown more than 1,250 miles. That's pretty impressive flying, I think.
I've gone for a similar tactic here, and I've also chosen a migratory moth. So the one we've got there is the hummingbird hawk moth, and you can see it looks just like a hummingbird, but it's really, really tiny. And they hover next to flowers to feed from the nectar, like you can see in the picture. It's got its big long proboscis out there, and it will hover and do that just like a hummingbird. But they also migrate to us all the way from the Mediterranean, and have even been recorded to have come from North Africa. So I don't know the distance in miles, unfortunately, but it's very far. And because it's so small, I feel like my fact is better.
Well, maybe I'll get some Google map going to see if I can work out exactly how far. But in the meantime, because I mean bats are bats can hover and do some amazing things with their flight as well. So unfortunately, my colleague that I'd hoped to speak with us isn't able to join us tonight, but I've got a pre-record. I'm going to warn you now, ladies and gentlemen, it's a little bit of a mashup of several videos that I've put together, and the volume may vary between some of them. And there's a couple where there's some thermal imaging of bats in flight in the middle, but there isn't any dialogue or anything in the background. I may try and commentate, or I may let you just enjoy them. We'll see if it's too quiet and feels a bit exam roomy. I may just add a few comments to break the silence. But let me just get this video up for us, and we can have a think about how cool bats are at flying. So hold on, let me open it with the right player. That's my challenge. Right. So we'll Oh, sorry. So just a thank you to my colleagues. You're going to hear first from Philip Briggs, who is the monitoring manager with BCT. I then got a selection of some little snippet videos of bats flying, courtesy partly of the BBC and partly from Ian Baker, who has this amazing thermal imaging camera. So it'll be black and white, but you'll see the white things are the hottest bits. So you'll see some white bats moving around and things. And then at the end, I've got a little bit from one of our trustees, Steve Rowe, who gave a talk recently at Wisley. And I've just got a little snippet of his talk to start explaining a little bit about echolocation as well, which is obviously another trick that bats have up their sleeve. So let me move that out of the way and start this off.
The varying flight speeds of different species. And to ensure the most energy efficient flight, bats need to find a balance between least energy or minimum power and highest speed, maximum range. And in fact, bats tend to go more for maximum range, so they will use a bit more energy just to achieve faster flight. So perhaps the benefit of saving energy is outweighed by increased chance of catching prey or outflying predators. But on the whole, smaller species, pipistrelles, fly at speeds of about 5 to 8 meters per second. That's 18 to 29 kilometers per hour. Larger species, such as the noctule here, will fly at least 14 meters per second, that'll be about 50 kilometers per hour. But when they're diving for prey, they will achieve even higher.
So wing shape does matter depending on what you're flying you're doing. So here you can see the fast hawking bats like noctules, they tend to have these long, narrow wings, whereas gleaning bats are much more maneuverable, they'll fly more slowly, but they've got sort of shorter, broader wings.
Of a brown long-eared bat. And you'll see how bats are incredibly maneuverable. They can slow down or change direction within a fraction of a second. We'll be seeing lots of examples of this through Ian and Liat's amazing thermal imaging footage later on. But in this clip from the life of mammals, you can see how the brown long-eared bat is incredibly maneuverable in flight thanks to its broad wings and can even manage hovering flight. So it's, hovering in one point in the air there.
Here's another one. This is a Natura's bat this time. Coming in, very maneuverable, as you can see, hovering there and helping itself to a nice spider snack straight off the web. So this is now switching to the thermal imaging. This was a pond with, these are Benton's bats. They've got quite a distinctive flight, almost a bit like hovercraft, low over the water, but you will see them dipping down, and they have quite large hairy feet that they can help to pick up insects from the water surface. One of the great things about thermal imaging is that it gives us insights into things that we just wouldn't otherwise know that much about. And so this is some of the social behaviour that they've observed with these Benton's bats. Ian's added some captions there explaining about the bats often flying in tandem. And we just don't fully understand this yet. It's one of the things I love about bats. There's so much we still have to learn. But you can also see what incredible acrobats they are as they are zipping around this pond. And so many of them. Look at those acrobats. Fantastic. And and having the proper hand wing, being able to flex their wings into so many different shapes to help them when they're flying is a real asset. And we will see a little bit more of that in the next clip as well. So this is very much slowed down, this bit of footage, to try and help us understand how this bat is feeding. And it's not just using its wings there, it's got a tail membrane that it uses for flight, but also to help it grab the prey there and do a full-on crunch in midair to help you get your food. And so mouth open, not just to eat, but also to help them figure out, use that echolocation to help them find their prey. There we go. You can see the different wing shapes that they're able to achieve, all in midair and all in a fraction of a second. And they're incredibly, well, there you go. That's it in real time. Whoosh, and it's gone. So here you can really see all those different shapes they're able to actually flex their wings into, with this very flexible membrane between the bones that are the same pattern of bones that we have in our hand. And again, just looking at how efficient bats are. So you can see that they're actually timing the calls with their sort of the down wing beats. So bats actually synchronize their wings, their heart, their lungs, and their calls to be as effective as possible.
I've put this picture here of this really cute long-eared bat. Apart from the fact it's cute, it's actually quite rare to get a photo of a bat with its mouth closed. Most of the photos you see of bats look like this. They've sort of shown their horrible gnashers and they look really scary. And that, you know, that's one of the problems that bats have in terms of the PR view, is that it's really difficult to get photographs of bats with the mouth closed, and it's because they're echolocating. So it's just like me talking to you now. If we were in somewhere like a church or a tunnel or a cave or mine, and we were having a conversation, you would hear the echo bouncing back off the solid walls. If I was to take the mask off and shout quite loud, you would get an echo off the wall at the back. Bats do exactly the same thing. They're just shouting a lot louder than we talk. It's sort of in terms of how loud it is, it would be like standing with a smoke alarm going off next to your ear. That's how many decibels the bats are. So it's quite a good thing that we can't hear them. So when you see bats looking like this, it's just that they are shouting out echolocation calls. So as they're flying on the down wing beat, a bit like when you're at the gym, you want to breathe out when you're working hardest. Bats are flying along and they're shouting dozens of pulses per second in ultrasound. Humans can hear up to about 20 kilohertz, depending on how many discos you've been to. Bats start echolocating at around 17, 18 kilohertz, depending on the species. So some of the kids in the audience, if they were to go out and hear nocturnal bats, they can hear them without the use of these bat detectors. The bats are shouting.
You should just say you can't use your children as a bat detector. Is that right? Yeah.
Quite often we'll go on a bat walk and the kids can hear the bats before the bat detectors will pick them up. And as bats shout out these high frequency sounds, they're listening for the echoes that come back. And not only are they able to hear the echoes coming back, but they can work out what's moving in the environment. So a solid wall at the back would produce a very loud echo. Something like a little wispy leaf of a poplar tree, for example, would produce a much weaker echo. So from that, bats are basically able to see what we can see, but using sound. I should say that the phrase "as blind as a bat" is complete nonsense. Bats can actually see perfectly well. It's just that their eyesight is adapted to low light levels. So we use these things called bat detectors, and commercially available portable bat detectors became available around the mid-1980s. Technology has moved on, not just in the world of everything, but bat detectors as well. And nowadays you can get one of these things and this will plug into your smartphone. You know, all the computer processing power is available in your Androids or Apple iPhone. You've basically got a miniature computer in your pocket, and these bat detectors will just plug into them and help you listen to these bat sounds, which is going on around us all the time, right? It's just that we can't hear it without the use of one of these.
So there you go. very good at flying, and then lining themselves up to be really efficient with their echolocation as well, which of course is how they track down these delicious moths and other insects and things to eat.
And yeah, that brings us on to our next fact off, which is all about appearance. So just gonna quickly share my
They are
screen.
sneaky, these moths, and I feel like there was a bit of me that regretted letting us put camouflage in, because I do feel like this might not be our strongest one.
Well,
however, one of my colleagues helped me out a little bit with but I did have to go non-native again.
yeah, well, I've gone for a UK species, which Emma mentioned earlier. So this is the buff tip moth, and as Emma said, it looks exactly like a snapped bit of twig, and I just think it's amazing. I've just never seen anything like it. So that's mine. But I was a bit shocked when I saw a preview of yours, because I couldn't actually see it for a while. So I think you've done quite well.
Well, as I said, I did have Andrea help me out, because this is a photo of a bat from Central America called the proboscis bat. And can you with your cursor just highlight for people in case anyone hasn't spotted it? That is the bat there, that darker shape. There we go. So I think, as camouflage goes, that's pretty good. I think the UK bats, they tend not to perhaps have to rely on camouflage as much, because they'll just squeeze themselves into tiny little crevices and just play hide and seek much more, I think, rather than hiding in plain sight. But I do love the buff tip moth. That they are just fantastic, I have to admit.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty close, but
yeah,
yours is good. And we're actually going on to our next round, which is round 4.
Yes, well, as we're on appearances, we'll keep going, because
and yeah, we've gone for, so this is a sort of, well, they're all picture rounds, but this is just going straight on appearance. So we're doing cute, weird and ugly, basically. So I'll go for mine first. So this lovely moth on the left there is a lackey moth, and I just think it looks exactly like a teddy bear, and I think it's so cute. And you can see those combed antennae really well, so that's a male moth there. But yeah, this one is a brown moth, but it's so fluffy and lovely, so I've chosen that for my cute moth, and that's a UK species as well that you can find here.
Oh, well, I'm UK as well. There we go. It's a brown long-eared bat. We do think they are a bit of the poster bat in some ways for UK bats. Look how cute they are. Big ears listening out, big ears actually, because of those sneaky moths trying to not be heard. So they can actually have such good hearing, they won't always use their echolocation to find their prey. They can hear things just sort of walking around on leaves or things like that. So they're the whispering bat. But super cute. We even made them on our logo because they're so cute. So I think that one ought to win, really.
And now we're going for weird. So Naomi, do you want to go through yours first on the left?
Yeah, so again, this isn't a native bat, in case anyone is worried that one of these is going to turn up flying around your garden at some point. This is a false vampire bat, and I do feel like it does look like maybe a moose had an unfortunate relationship with something else. It is a bit of a weird looking bat, but it is it's a false vampire, so it doesn't necessarily drink blood, but it will prey on smaller animals, so it is still a definite predator out there.
And I've gone for something that I came across the other day in a book, not in the UK. This is also not found here, and this is called a monkey slug caterpillar. So it is actually a caterpillar, even though it doesn't look like it, or what we know caterpillars to look like, and it's the larva of the hag moth. So you get different types of monkey slug found around the world, but I just think it's amazingly weird. It looks like a carpet.
The head?
To be honest, Naomi, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea, but it's amazing. It's got all these like fleshy projections with fur all over it, and I think those hairs are irritant as well. So that's my
Don't mess with
weird.
It. Yeah. Okay, onto the ugly. The face only a mother could love. I feel like, this is, for anyone that's not seen one before, this is a wrinkled bat, and they're actually frugivores. So apparently all the wrinkles and things will help channel fruit juice down into their mouths. But, that really is, I feel, a face that only a mother could love.
Yeah, and I've gone for something that looks like it's out of a bit like out of a horror movie. But this is called a lobster moth, and you can see it does resemble a lobster. The lobster moth caterpillar. But interestingly, the early instars, so the caterpillars that you get before this, caterpillars molt and grow and molt again, so they have multiple instars. So the earlier ones actually mimic red ants. So they look just like ants, and that's to, you know, stop them being predated. So really interesting, although pretty ugly.
Sneaky at every life stage, aren't they, these moths? Very
yeah.
sneaky. But moving on from a face that maybe only a mother could love, we're thrilled to have with us today one of our volunteer bat carers. Gail Armstrong is a bit of a hero of mine, if I'm completely honest, because she is out there looking after bats when either their mothers don't need them or they've got themselves into trouble somehow. But Gail is amazing. She's also known as the Bat Lady up in Lancashire and the surrounds. So she's going to actually tell us a little bit about what she's been up to and who she's got sharing the room with her at the moment.
Okay, everybody, I do quite a lot of bat care, and I've put a second camera on here because at the moment in late summer, any bats that we've had in that had lost their mums will be learning to fly. And I've got a little group in here that I'm just going to put out into the flight cage, so they should just be waking up. And this might work, I hope it does. So in here, I've got 3 little pipistrelles that are just waking up. They came in as tiny babies and they've been hand raised and they're getting ready to go out into the flight cage. So you can see they like to be undercover, but just for this little section, I'm giving you a bit of a closer look while they start to wake up. This one's looking a bit fat, I think. So these are little pipistrelles. These are our smallest bats and the ones that we get most of into care, because 9 out of 10 bats in the country are pipistrelle. The reasons they come into care can be as simple as they've just got a bit hungry, or they got caught out somewhere they shouldn't be and they're just a bit weak. That's probably over half of the bats that I get in. And then the next most biggest category is cats. Bats that have been caught by cats that are allowed out at night to hunt, and that's probably about 30% of the bats I take in, and that could be stopped if you kept your cat in overnight and that stops most of the hunting that cats do. So if you do own a cat and it does hunt when you let it out, have a think about keeping it in at night so that you could stop all those casualties that I get in. And out of the bats that come in that have been caught by cats, only probably 1 in 7 gets better well enough to be released. Most of them have to be put down due to injuries or they die due to infection. So that's our little pipistrelles. There, I'll cover them back up now. They're getting ready to go out into the flight cage tonight. And then I'll just show you one of our larger bats. I'm sorry I have to keep bending down because I do have them all within arm's reach, but obviously. So you might want to big me up on your screen to see this little guy because he's gorgeous. So this is a liceless bat, much rarer than the pipistrelles. And this little guy has been with me for a couple of years because he can't be released back to the wild due to an injury. He's so rare as a liceless bat. He's the only one ever found in Lancashire, believe it or not. and what a shame that he can't go back to the wild. But we don't really have this species in Lancashire. It's a bit of a mystery why not, because we do have the habitat. But this little guy's done a lot of good work on behalf of bats generally and on behalf of his species by being a little ambassador bat. And because he's a little bit bigger, he doesn't try to fly. I'm saying that bravely. I hope he doesn't. Because if he does, I'll be on the floor trying to get him from under the table. You might be able to hear him clicking. I don't know if anybody can hear that.
I think the Zoom filter might not.
Yeah, he is echolocating. So he is trying to look at you all.
Oh, someone can, maybe in my ears. Oh yeah, no, I caught it that time.
Yeah. So that's my license bat, and if he was flying, his wingspan would be this big.
Or double for 2 wings.
Or double for 2, yeah. So that's my bat care stars for tonight. 3 little pipistrelles learning to fly, and beautiful male ligeless bat in captivity because he wouldn't survive in the wild. Back to you, Naomi.
Gail, thank you so much. And I'm just going to clarify that you've put the mask on to actually protect the bats from COVID, haven't you? So this is one of the things we want to make sure that we don't introduce COVID into the wild bat population by accident. So Gail and all the bat carers take lots of extra precautions to protect themselves from any diseases the bats might be carrying, but also to protect the bats from anything that we might accidentally give to them. So Gail, thank you so much. You are a superstar.
Yeah, we don't know yet whether we could pass it on, and certainly I have no symptoms of COVID, but because we are very precautionary, we've got gloves and masks anytime we get close up and personal with a bat.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
Thanks, Gail. I have to admit they are very, very cute. So yeah, just before we go on to our next fact off, I just wanted to ask you, Naomi, how bats are doing overall and what their threats are.
So a range of things, some of which may be similar to some of the issues that that moths are facing, particularly, in the nocturnal world. Loss of habitat, lighting and things, and sort of various infrastructure projects and things can all reduce the available habitat and things that they can be making use of. And of course, for bats, that can be key roosting areas as well as foraging areas. We do have our monitoring program that goes on, and you may or may not be aware, all bats are actually protected because they went through such a massive decline at one point. We're starting to see some of them steadying and possibly some of them starting to increase again. Obviously, having been through a massive decline, it's going to take a while to get back up to where we were. So this is not to say that all is rosy for bats, and it is a checkered pattern for different species. We've got some species that are really rare, so we can't actually get very good statistics to actually see what's going on. But the National Bat Monitoring Programme uses loads of people out, just regular members of the community who go out to help us monitor the bats, and then we have some very clever statisticians who play with all of that data to help us work out what trends are happening. So hopefully, if things can continue and we can keep protecting our bats, hopefully we will start to see more recovery. But how are things going for moths in particular?
Yeah, so yes, I'll stick to the moths. It's Butterfly Conservation. So Butterfly Conservation have recently released a publication, which is the state of Britain's larger moths, and that found it did find quite a worrying decline in about a third of those larger moths over the last 50 years. So, overall not looking that great. But just like you said, there's lots of differences between species, and there are some winners and some losers. And Emma mentioned earlier, but the Jersey tiger moth is a moth that's been found to have been spreading quite a lot and doing quite well. And that's one that we're finding more and more in London too, so in urban areas. And in terms of threats, very much the same: habitat loss and fragmentation, intensive agriculture, so the use of pesticides and herbicides. It's obviously harmful, and that links to bats as well because they've got less food. And then pollution, so artificial light. So we've seen some research quite recently which has shown how impactful that can be, and also climate change. So lots of it needs more research, but that's shown to have an effect as well. So overall not great, but there's definitely some winners there and lots of things that we can do, and we'll talk about this later. And just like bats, we have a monitoring scheme as well. So we've got the National Moth Recording Scheme, so all that moth trapping that people do, that will go towards that and towards publications like this. So I think it's on to our next fact off now, which is the life cycle. Bear with me.
Here we go.
So, shall I start off?
Yeah, what is going on in your photos? what is that?
It's not the prettiest photo. So we've done some pretty moths, and I thought I'd go for one, which is a bit weirder. So it's a bit of a sad story. It's the female vapour moth in the pictures there, on top and below there, and you can see that she's not really got wings. She's got these tiny little stumps there, and the female vapour moth is flightless, and her role really is she comes out of the cocoon, she sends off signals to males, and they will sense that with their combed antenna, come and find her, mate with her, and she'll lay the eggs still on that same cocoon that she's emerged from. So basically she's just evolved to be kind of a bag of eggs or an egg making machine. So yeah, it's quite a sad story, but it's very interesting, and a really interesting story of evolution there, because not all moths have that. Most female moths do have those wings, so I thought I'd pick that one. I think it looks quite cute, even though it's strange looking.
Well, that's it. Without the wings, I don't know if I'd have recognised it as a moth. I do,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, moving away from like the Handmaid's Tale that we've got going on over there. I'm going to highlight here, bats are great dedicated mums. They're mammals, so of course, the females not only carry the babies throughout pregnancy, but they then suckle them. But I feel like they take a bit more control over in some ways, because particularly here in the UK, we don't have insects. There isn't enough food throughout the year. So as you probably know, bats will hibernate in the winter when there's not enough food to eat. But this can cause some challenges, because bats mate in the autumn. And obviously at a time when there's no food available, a female doesn't want to be having to support a pregnancy on top of trying to get through hibernation, or try and produce milk or anything like that. So she very sensibly stores the sperm until the spring. So she waits until she wakes up. The warmer weather, there's going to be more insects around. She can then have her pregnancy in the springtime, have the baby when the insects are going to be peaking. So there's going to be plenty of food both for her and for her to produce milk, and then obviously for her baby to wean onto afterwards. I mean, sperm storage, that's quite a, really taking control there, I think.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool fact. And that's it was the baby underneath the armpit, isn't it?
Yes, so that was a little baby pipistrelle bat, not even fully head or anything at that point, but still suckling from mum in that picture. So yeah,
that's a pretty cool fact. I'm now going to share a video, and it's Emma again that we met earlier, but it's pre-recorded. So this is all about, actually someone asked a question: how do you make your own a moth trap? How do you do a DIY moth trap? And luckily we've come prepared, so I'm gonna just play this video, so bear with me a second.
Hi, it's Emma from Butterfly Conservation, and myself and the conservation officer from Kent's Magnificent Moths have come up with a really simple moth trap for those that are interested in mothing and perhaps don't want to spend the money of a professional moth trap. Now, these won't be as good, and by no means will you get the same variety of species, but if you're just getting started and you just want to see what kind of moths are in your garden, then this is perfect. So for this really easy DIY moth trap, you are going to need a bucket. I don't have a bucket, so I've substituted already for a plant pot, and I've covered any holes at the bottom of the plant pot with some electrical tape. You don't need electrical tape, any kind of really sticky tape just to stop the moths from escaping will be perfect, but just make sure it's really stuck down so that the moths don't get stuck to it themselves. Then you will need egg boxes. Now you want the egg boxes to come about 2/3 of the way up whatever your container is, and you just want to put them on the sides like this. So I've chopped mine down to be the right height. I'm not sure if you can see, but there you go. And then next, you can get this from any kind of pet shop, is a cat collar or a dog collar if you've got a bigger bucket. And this is perfect to create that funnel. So you want to put it in this way up, and that way the moths will land on the inner edge and crawl down to rest inside the egg boxes. They're really, really cheap. This cost me a couple of pounds. So just press that in like so. And then the next is, we got this off the internet. I'm sure you can get it from supermarkets and most of the shops, to be honest. It's a lamp. And we've got a lamp, and it's really important, it makes it really easy if you get one of the ones that just clip on to a shelf, and you can bend it and all sorts. So I've changed the bulb onto this to a UV bulb. It's just a lot brighter, and it still runs quite cool, so it's still quite safe for children to use, but it will create a brighter light that will hopefully attract more insects, giving you a better shot at seeing some moths. So once you've changed your light bulb, you are just going to press it onto the edge and play around with this wire until the bulb is nearly resting inside that circle funnel, but not all the way in. And then we plug it in later and see what we get. The moth trap is outside. I've got it plugged in on a nice warm sunny evening, and I'm excited to see what it's going to catch.
Great. Hope you could all see that okay. So yeah, that's an example of how you can do that. And just to say as well that moth trapping doesn't have to be done in the countryside. As we said earlier, urban areas are really good places to do them. And I think the fact is that I think it's even in an urban garden, you can get around 100 species or over 100 species. So it's a really, you can do it anywhere. And I know Emma said that one of the engagement activities she did with the Kent's Magnificent Moth Project was making some moth traps with some children, and they worked quite well. So really good.
I feel like there must be some sort of evening you could do with make a moth trap, go off and do a bat walk, and then come back and see what's in your moth trap.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Wow, 170 species on a trap on a balcony.
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah.
Nice. So we're starting to think about ways that people can get involved, but we keep dancing around. One of our topics is, of course, diet for these. I did sort of query some people as to whether it was okay for me to actually include an image of a bat eating a moth tonight, and I thought maybe that wouldn't be the most politic way to go. So I have picked a different bat for this round.
There we go. You go first with yours, Naomi.
Okay, so I do feel like this is a bat photoed where he is basically going, I am a badass bat, with that kind of expression on his face. And to be fair, this is a pallid bat. It is a desert bat from North America. These guys, I mean, if you live in a desert, you've got to eat what you can find. They eat scorpions. But the really amazing thing about them is that the scorpion venom doesn't really affect them. They're unfazed by even the most venomous scorpions in North America. And these are ones that will kill a small child if left untreated. And a bat is much smaller than a small child. And yet that's what they do. So I think that is quite an impressive as a diet to go out there and eat scorpions.
Yeah, that is pretty good. I've gone for an amazing moth called the Death's Head Hawk moth. So you can see there it's got on its back, it looks like there's a skull, so that's where it gets its name from. But the reason why I've chosen this one is because they actually have a taste for honey. So to avoid being stung to death by the bees, they actually squeak like a queen bee, and that's to trick the honeybees to make them, not sting it to death. So I think that's amazing that they can mimic that queen bee. So we've gone for quite similar, try not to be stung to death bats. But yeah, really interesting.
Bat can take it. That's the thing. I think, this is a badass bat, Ellie. We're not going around just tricking everyone the whole time.
Yeah, it does seem that that's what moths do.
Yeah, that's what I'm taking away from this.
But speaking of diet and how we can help moths and bats, we're now going to hear from Steve Bolton, who's my colleague on the Big City Butterflies project. So Steve is the conservation officer, and we're going to hear about how you can do planting to help bats and moths.
Great, thank you, Ellie. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen and share some slides. Great. Yes, hope you can hear me and see the screen. Yes, I'm going to talk about planting for moths and bats and what you can do to help. So I've got some slides here. What do moths and bats need, kind of in the context of planting? Well, obviously bats need a huge number of insects, so we can consider what kind of planting we can do to attract a wide variety of insects. And moths in particular need nectar as food sources, but also caterpillar food plants and shelter to support their life cycle. So really a wide variety of plants supports more moths and insects, and we can also think about flowering plants through the season to provide those nectar sources through the season, and the trees and shrubs, which are both food sources and shelter. So how can you help? Well, there's lots of different habitats in your gardens. We think about planting and some tips. I'll provide some tips for kind of gardening a bit later in the presentation. Meadow habitats are fantastic for supporting biodiversity and lots of different invertebrates. In public green spaces where we're working with many different friends groups, and there's different habitats available there to support invertebrates and insects. And in allotments, again, there's planting that you can do and different plants that can support invertebrates and insects. Hedgerows are a fantastic habitat, particularly where you can provide native trees and shrubs. They're a fantastic wildlife corridor and support many different species of insect. And yes, I'm sure bats love dispersing along those hedgerows and collecting up all those insects. And again, if we can have some variety within the hedgerow, some native species like hawthorn and blackthorn, but also some fruit species in there as well, like crabapple, will just bump up that diversity and again be supporting lots of different insects and moths. And yes, as I mentioned, it's both the food sources and places for moth caterpillars to shelter. And yeah, there's lots of flowering plants that provide those nectar sources within native hedges. So meadow habitat, and yeah, you don't necessarily have to have a full-blown species-rich meadow. Just even leaving long grass around the hedges and edges is a good start. But yes, you could consider whether you could sow a wildflower meadow nearby to get more of a species range and those flowering plants through the season. So just a few tips in terms of if you have got some local green spaces or even a mini meadow in your garden, and you'd like to sort of enhance some of those grassland areas. It's a good idea firstly just to let it grow and actually let the grass grow longer, see what's coming through, see what diversity you've got in those grassland areas. You might struggle where the soil has been enriched with fertilizer or is quite a rich soil. That is a bit more of a difficult to get the wildflowers growing. But there are things you can do to reduce those nutrient levels, like multiple cut and collects of the grass. So if there are some grassland areas you're keen to work on, if you allow the grass to grow long and then cut and rake it off towards the end of the summer, you can open up the grassland areas and then consider raking off and harrowing to kind of open up the soils a bit more, remove the thatch, and that might allow you to sow some seeds to kind of improve the diversity. So sowing the seeds thinly and trample them in to make good contact with the soil. And that's best done in the late summer or autumn, but can also be done in early spring. And yellow rattle can help, but this needs to be done in autumn, and that's a parasite on the grasses, that particular plant. So it helps, stops the grasses from dominating, encourages some of the wild flowers. And yes, you can use a kind of meadow mix or something like that, ideally of local provenance, or for example, if you have got a good bit of hay meadow nearby, actually spreading green hay from a nearby meadow ensures you've got some local provenance and some good seed sources from nearby. And hey presto, with any luck, you can create and see some of this type of meadow habitat. So on the left, we've got a variety of the grasses, and particularly finer grasses that support many different invertebrates, of butterflies and moths, and also the wildflowers and the nectar sources in there. And you can see some hedge habitat and trees, and it's that variety of habitat that should support the maximum number of kind of insects and invertebrates. And of course, to maintain a bit of access for people, so people can get in there and enjoy the meadow area. So you can see some paths cut in there. And then in the bottom right, more of a kind of picture from an urban context, and that particular grassland area was just regularly mown amenity grassland, and it took a couple of years of mowing and cutting and removing the arisings to improve it, and it was then seeded, and so this is an area where meadow habitat was created from normal amenity grassland, and then to keep it sort of tidy and look cared for, you can see that mown edge kind of around the path, which helps in those urban areas. And just quickly to give you actually some moth caterpillar food plants, you can see a variety there, and this is particularly the trees and the shrubs, which also provide really good shelter. So there's a variety in there which are useful reference, and the moths they support, but bramble, for example, is a great food source for both moths and has the nectar sources for other pollinators like butterflies. We've got species like hazel in there, which are great for a garden, for example. If you don't have much room for bigger trees or shrubs, then hazel is one that can be coppiced, so it can be cut back kind of in winter time, and then it will regrow in the spring. Privet is another good one that could be used for hedging as well, and supports the privet hawk moth, which, if you're not familiar with, there's this big beauty which was trapped on attracted to a light trap on a Croydon Nature Reserve, so they're pretty fantastic beasts. Then just quickly on a quick snapshot of some of the herbaceous plants that provide caterpillar and insect food plants, but also nectar sources. So there's a good variety in there, like garlic mustard, for example, supports the garden carpet moth, but is also the caterpillar food plant of the orange-tip butterfly. There's honeysuckle in there, which again is a caterpillar food plant, but that one in particular is also a good night-scented nectar source, so attracts moths at night time. We've got also some great nectar sources for pollinators, like marjoram and oxeye daisy, which attract a wide range of pollinators and butterflies, and a good meadow nectar sources as well. Nettle, of course, you're familiar with, supports quite a good variety of moths, moth caterpillars, also butterfly caterpillars, as I'm sure you're aware, things like peacock and red admiral butterfly. Then also some of the communal garden, even your dandelion and dock and plantain down there at the bottom support quite a number of different moth species. So yeah, it's definitely worthwhile allowing some of these things you might call weeds to grow and sort of flourish. And this is a lime hawk moth. Yeah. So just a few tips on what you can do to support insects in your garden or indeed your green spaces. So creating shelter with log or leaf piles and leaving long grass over winter helps provide shelter for overwintering invertebrates and insects so they can complete their life cycle. A pond or marshy area will attract many insects, and you may even get some of the bats flying in to take those flying insects. Generally, avoid use of pesticides and try and encourage natural predators. So your predatory beetles and centipedes, that sort of thing, and they can be encouraged with compost heaps and log piles. If there's a meadow habitat in your green space, then yes, don't scalp it, don't cut it right down to the bone, again, because we want to provide overwintering habitat for insects, like at the base of grasses, and ideally, actually, you should always leave some areas uncut over winter, again, for that reason, to provide overwintering habitat. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a snapshot. There's lots of good information out there from sources like Wild About Gardens, but also our own Butterfly Conservation website in terms of gardening tips and gardening plants for moths. So that brings me to the end, and I just thought I'd share with you this fantastic poplar hawk moth that was attracted to a light trap in my garden. So great, thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Steve. I've still never seen a poplar hawk moth in real life, so that's next year I will see one. But I think we're almost coming to the end now, but just before we do the voting, Naomi, can you tell us really quickly 3 ways that you can help bats? Oh, you're on mute.
I've managed it every other time. There's always one, isn't there? Well, definitely, as Steve said, planting, attracting in more of these delicious moths and other insects for the bats to eat is a great way to then bring bats into your local garden or green space. You can get involved as a volunteer. Join your local bat group if you want to start finding out more about bats in your area, what conservation projects and things may be going on. So do get in touch with more batty people in your local area. And if you really do want to then help monitor the bats, there is, as I touched on earlier, that National Bat Monitoring Programme where you can actually help us find out how the bats are doing. We've got, lots of places around the country that we still don't know what's going on with them, so the more people that can help with that, the more we know, the better. How about you, Ellie? What could we be doing to support moths?
I'm just going to mirror you, really. So, planting, like Steve said, that's a really, really accessible and easy way to help moths, and in turn bats as well, and other pollinators, other insects. Anything you do to help moths is obviously going to help lots of other species as well. And the next thing is recording. So we'll share all this information as well on a follow-up email, but there's the National Moth Recording Scheme, there's iRecord for casual records, which Emma mentioned on the chat earlier, and also the Big Butterfly Count does have some moths on it. So I'm not trying to plug butterflies, but it does have some day flying moths. So they've added another one this year, the Jersey Tiger. Have I done 3? Maybe that's 2. So the third one, I'd say spread the word and volunteer. So, get people enthused about moths and they'll care about them more, and volunteer. So I have done 4, but I'd also sign up for the local volunteer branches if you're interested, and find out more there too.
Fabulous, right. Well, the other thing I must remember to say is a massive thank you to everyone who donated, because actually that is another way that you're supporting us. So we've actually had over £200 donated, which will be split between BCT and BC. So thank you very much. That will go to support the conservation work that each of us are doing. But now, after we've shared all of these cool facts and we've completely convinced you that bats are the winners, sorry, either of us are the winners, we are going to put it to the vote. So I'm going to launch a quick poll where you should have it pop up in front of you and be able to. I knew they were tricky. Ellie, did you mess with my poll? I feel like that's slightly biased. Let's try this again. Okay, so This time we're looking for who do you think is the winner? Bats versus moths. Is it bats? Is it moths? Or do you actually convince that they're both fantastic?
Oh,
so I
always going like this.
Yeah, I don't think you guys. I think you guys just get to vote, don't you? I will share the results in just a moment. So we've got. Oh, it's going in.
Looking good for
78% of people have done it. I'm going to give you like another 10 seconds. You know, come on, gut instinct. Click your button. Let us know what you think, and then we will share the results. Who is the winner? Bats versus moths. I think that's just about done. Are we there? 88%. Right. I'm going to end it now. Here we go.
It's a tie.
It's a tie, 62% of you. Aww. You know, I have to confess, you did have some good facts about moths. I mean, obviously, you know, team bat technically, but moths are definitely growing a place in my heart. They are, but very tricky is what I'm taking away from this evening. So thank you so much to everyone that has joined us today. Particular thanks to all of our presenters today. So to Mark, to Emma, to Gail, to Steve, and Ellie, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our little fact off. I don't know, you know, I'll accept that maybe it was a tie this time. I'm very happy to try and lay down the gauntlet again for next year.